resumes. We want to make sure those resumes are as potent as possible. And the best way to do that is by using our cheat sheet, which is known as the job description, right? Engaging employers. There's nothing more than crafting an awesome resume, a resume that speaks to your educational background, your experiences. You've spent countless hours pouring into crafting it. Does nothing if it goes nowhere. It does nothing if you don't know how to shop it. It's almost like John Coltrane creating a Love Supreme and nobody ever hearing it, right? So we got to talk about how we shop that resume because it's extremely important. And then, of course, we'll have Q&A either afterwards or we can kind of exchange and have somewhat of a Q&A as we go along. So a little bit about me. I'm from a small town, Yaden, Pennsylvania. It's right outside Southwest Philadelphia. I attended Penwood High School, which is not too far from Yaden, Pennsylvania, Lansdowne, Pennsylvania. Graduated in the year 2000, went on to Temple University, and I studied communications, broadcasting, to be exact. In fact, if you told me I'd be a recruiter even 15 years ago, I'd say you were crazy, and I'd bet you any amount of money that I was going to spend the rest of my life on the radio, being a radio personality. It's something that I enjoy doing, something I still enjoy doing. But funny enough, through my recruitment endeavors, I'm able to exercise a lot of the creative juices that kind of come with being a radio personality. And so I am a radio personality turned recruiter, and it's something that I absolutely love. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. I've been in this field, talent acquisition, for 13 years. I call it #myobsession. Introducing phenomenal opportunities to phenomenal candidates is something that I wake up every single day just thinking about how I get better at it, and how do I create more opportunities so that I can introduce it to more people. That's just what I live for. That's what I do. And that's something that I'm extremely passionate about. I've worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies, ADP, Morgan Stanley, and I'm now at Marsh & McLennan Companies, which is a global risk management and insurance broker. Headquartered in New York. I'm actually in New York. I'm based out of Brooklyn, New York. Originally from, again, Yaden, Pennsylvania. I've been in New York now for about 10 years. I am an author. I published my first book about a year ago at The Career Plug, a recruiter's insight for early career professionals. And it really encapsulates, again, my philosophy of this really being one big game. We'll talk about that in a second and how to really play that game. And so that's at The Career Plug. I'm an author as well as a blog also. Yeah, thecareerplug.com. Kind of just free thoughts that every now and again I have about this recruitment game, about this talent acquisition game, about how to best position you for the opportunities that you're interested in. That's where the blog is. And so you can kind of check out the blog, thecareerplug.com. My latest baby. Anybody in there? Yes, let me admit somebody. My latest baby. Sorry, looking at the comments. What's going on, Daniel? Appreciate you. My latest baby, the D9ResumeExchange.com. If you are on this call and you are part of the Divine Nine, that's the 9 historically Black fraternities and sororities, my pet project, my baby, I'm creating somewhat of a monster.com for those who are in the Divine Nine. I'm creating a career plug, a career builder for those in the Divine Nine. If you're looking for opportunities, if in fact you are a part of the Divine Nine, I would highly suggest you drop your resume at the D9 Resume Exchange, and we can talk more about that offline. Do not want to make this a huge plug about the D9 Resume Exchange, but let's get down to the meat and potatoes. This employer engagement thing is just one big game. Why do I say that? 13 years, been dealing with all of the different players, learning all of the different techniques, learning the strategies, following the trends. And let me tell you something. It's one big game. And it's incumbent upon you to understand that this game, what it all entails, what goes into this game. You got to understand the rules, the guidelines, the processes, the players that are all a part of this game that we call employer engagement, resume crafting, interviewing. And so I like to really liken it to one big game. I'm a huge Kobe Bryant fan. We'll talk about that in a second. And we'll even talk about his mentality and philosophy and how he approached his game and how we, us, folks in this employment game, us trying to find jobs, us looking for opportunities, us looking to switch careers. How do we play this game? And how do we play it well, right? That's what the book is about. That's what I'm about. First, we got to talk about some of the guidelines, some of the restrictions, some of the things that just aren't changing almost no matter where you're looking for opportunities, no matter what employer you may be engaging, there's certain processes in place that's pretty standard across the board. We're getting to resumes in a second, but it's important to understand the structure of how that resume is going to navigate through. And the best we understand these stages and the structure, well, then the best we can position that resume to make sure we put it in front of the key decision makers. I want to pause for a second, allow you to digest the 7 stages of the selection process. I know you can read, but I'm just going to go ahead and go through the 7 really quickly. Application, and mind you, this is stuff we already know. This is stuff we've already been through. This is stuff we're currently going through now, those who are currently looking for opportunities. Start with an application, right? Hopefully somebody sees it. They'll screen it. They'll make a selection, whether they think you're qualified or not. If they do, you'll probably get a phone interview, or it's 2020, almost 2021. It may even be a higher view, a video interview, right? That assessment will take place. It may be a second or even a final round interview thereafter. Those folks will then say, is this person right for the job or not? They'll say yes or no. Then you'll possibly maybe have to submit some references, maybe even have to do a background check before you get the offer. Usually that happens after though, but in certain cases, you'll have to maybe submit some references, maybe even submit to a background check. But more than likely, you'll get the offer, then you'll get that background check. Of course, the decision is made, you'll have the job offer, and off to the races, right? But this is about resume crafting. I want to go back to the whole question, the purpose of your resume. Oftentimes, I ask candidates, it's a great resume. What was your motive for making this resume? Oh, to get a job. That's what most of us would say, right? I created this resume. I put this blood, sweat, and tears so I can get to yellow, right? If we're looking at the screen, so I can get to that job offer or contract, right? That's why I put this blood, sweat, and tears into this resume. And that's why I love to push back on candidates and say, if you created this resume for that job offer, well, then you started off wrong. Because never, ever in my 13 years of recruiting have I ever looked at a resume, handed it to a hiring manager, and the hiring manager said, hire him, hire her. You crazy? This resume is awesome. That's it. Get the paperwork going. Don't need to talk to him. Never. It's never happened, ever. So that being, and let's be very clear, could it have happened in life? Sure. But in my 13 years, never. So that being said, I would recommend we don't create or craft our resume for the yellow, for the offer. That's putting the cart before the horse. We really create that resume right there, that second stage, the screening and selection process. Do you know what player, again, we're talking about the game, right? Do you know what player sits at the screening and selection process? Usually we call them the gatekeeper. Sometimes we call them the HR professional. Other times we call them the recruiter. And so it's important that, oh, and let's be very clear, that yellow all the way to the end, the business is making that decision. Let me let some folks in. Sorry, got some folks who want to get all this good information. Got to let them in. They want, that's the business that's making that decision, right? You got to get past the gatekeeper. When I say business, I mean hiring manager. You got to get past me. You got to get past the recruiter. You got to get past the HR generalist, right? So you need to create that resume, of course, with the job description and the position in mind, but you need to really be thinking about that recruiter. You need to really be thinking about that HR professional and how you can speak to them using this document, the greatest marketing tool that will ever represent you, i.e. a resume or a CV, right? We got to think about them. And here's why. I'm an HR professional, but I work for a risk management firm. A lot of players who open up opportunities are risk management folks. See what I'm saying? They're risk management, I'm HR. I didn't go to school for risk management. Yes, do I know a little thing or two about risk management now that I've been working at Marsh & McLennan for almost 4 or 5 years now? I do. That being said, there's still a steep learning curve from your qualifications, your past experiences, your past education, And for me to translate that, not being a risk manager or not being an insurance broker, but being an HR professional, I then have to translate that resume. I have to translate that resume to make sure that you are in fact qualified. But there's a learning curve. So how do you do that? And we'll talk about that in a second. I want to slow down really quickly because I know this question comes up often, and I just want to make sure that we hit on the 3 different types of resumes that you may see or come across. And folks may wonder what resume format is best for them, right? And so just to recap, we understand the purpose of the resume is to introduce yourself to employers, present your qualifications. All should be on one page. And the object of the resume is to get you to the interview, not get you the job, get you to the interview. And it's incumbent upon you to bring that resume to life in the interview to get the job, all right? So we have chronological resume formats, which most of us, probably 99.9% of us on this call who has a resume is in chronological order, based on history, of course, chronological order. Then you have functional. And a lot of folks oftentimes ask me, why would I create a functional resume? Why would I create a resume, functional resume, that highlights my skill sets as opposed to just my work history and educational history? Why would I want to highlight my skill sets for those who may be switching industries, or even those who may be in school still with no quote unquote professional experience to put on your resume? Functional resume or a combined, which functional or chronological kind of combined, may be best suited for those who are still in school with no experience whatsoever, but you want to focus on the fact that you are an IT major and you want the recruiter to know just how much you know and just how much skill, how many skills you have to be able to do the job. And so functional resume kind of fits that bill. Again, those who may not have any experience or those who may be switching careers, and that experience that you may have may not be a one-to-one because you're going to another industry. All right, now that that's being said, again, we're talking about resumes. Where am I at on time? Of course, I have nothing in front of me that has the time. All right, cool, 6:24. Job description. Anybody who comes to me and says, T, I need help with my resume. All right, cool, no problem. The next question I always ask, okay, well, what role are you looking at? Oh, no, I'm not there yet. I just need help with my resume. Negative. You're shooting in the dark at that point. Oftentimes, conventional knowledge would say, oh, I'm awesome. Let me just put all my awesome stuff down on this piece of paper, send it to the employer. They'll see how awesome I am. They'll ask me for an interview. It's typically how we think it should work, right? But I just want to give you a news flash that you probably got another, like maybe 500 other people applying to that same role. And so it's important that we increase the potency of our resume. We oftentimes dilute the efficacy of our resume when we just slap any and everything on it that we think makes us look good, and then expect the recruiter or expect the employer to decipher and figure out all the rest. It don't work like that. I promise you. When we think about creating our resume, I like to call it your companion document to the job description. It really should be almost a one-to-one mirror, meaning if I look at your resume, it should almost translate to what the job description says. And it's incumbent upon us to get extremely creative on how we look at each bullet point in a job description. And we need to dig deep within ourselves and say, what have I done either within my educational background or in my professional background that can speak to this bullet point? And this, you need to understand and decipher the 2 different types of information that you typically see in a job description. And I want to take a moment to talk about that. The 2 different types of information. Let's start with the qualified. Bachelor degree equivalent practical experience, 5 years of experience working in or across sales. Project management experience on initiatives, experience managing senior stakeholders. These are minimum qualifications. I want to pause there for a second. Harvard Business Review, Harvard Business School, they did a study in terms of the difference in application behaviors between men and women. Men, only thing we got to do is see about 35% of the qualification. If we meet about 35% of those qualifications, I'm applying, and we actually think we should be interviewed for it. Whereas when they looked at how women apply to roles, it's interesting. And again, this is just a broad stroke, but this is what the data says, that if women, if you're not qualified one-to-one with each bullet point, you tend not to apply to that role. I find that fascinating. Women, you look at those qualifications and you say, okay, I have a bachelor's degree, I have 5 years, I have project management experience, I am applying. Whereas a man will look at that and say, I got a bachelor's, but I only got 3 years, barely managed a project, but I'm applying, right? Different types of data. When it comes to that minimum qualifications, oftentimes, well, what if I got 3 years? All right, you can apply, but just know somebody else with a more potent resume who has the 5 years has the advantage over you. And that's just one person. So the two different types of information. So I say that to say, if you have 3 years, you really need to ask yourself, should I waste my time? And I don't want to say waste. That's not really a proper term. But do I want to invest the time already knowing that I'm starting from the back? I don't qualify. And I want to stress this because I know oftentimes we like to get in our own heads and we like to say, but I'm good. But that's all they got to do is bring me in the door and I'll show them, I'll prove to them just how hard I work, right? It don't work like that. People are too busy. People have a lot going on. And I'm going to tell you right now, if I have a resume in front of me that has 5 years experience and someone that has 3 years, you can guarantee I'm going with the 5. Why? Because I have a job to do. I still need to present not only that resume, but that candidate to the manager. Again, understanding the players in the game and understanding their motives so you can gain advantage, okay? You give me your little 3 years, I got another resume that say 5 years, I'm pushing the 5 years. Why? Because I have a job to keep. And that manager's gonna look at me and say, but I told you during our intake call, I'm looking for somebody with 5 years. And I don't want you to think these numbers are just arbitrary and they just kind of pull them from the sky. No, 5 years says something in corporate speak. 5 years, if you started out from college, meaning you're approaching your senior analyst or even a assistant vice president sort of era in your career. And that speaks, it's sort of like a shortcut, that speaks to managers. Or I guess in a roundabout way, that's managers speaking to the market saying, listen, we need somebody with this amount of experience because we equate that with somebody who has an understanding of how to deal with senior leadership. A huge thing, huge thing. Can you even be in a meeting with a CEO or C-suite? May seem easy, but if you haven't done it, it's a different arena. And do you have experience in that? Because not only do you need to be in that room, you need to be vocal in that room. You need to be confident. And I'll tell you, there's nothing that can replace confidence like experience, right? So if you got your 3 years, you got to ask yourself, again, understanding the data that's in front of us, you got to ask yourself, do I want to go down this road? And if you do get that denial email or what have you, you shouldn't be surprised. So we got our minimum qualifications. That's one type of information. That's your benchmarking data. That's for you to really say, is it worth me investing in revamping, recrafting my resume, engaging this employer? Is it worth it? Knowing I don't qualify. Or on the flip side, knowing I do qualify. And that's when we really expand the potency on our resumes and we can really flex a little bit when we actually do qualify, right? So job description sets the rules of engagement, vital resource, right? You got to pay close attention to the language that's being used. I highlighted right there in the red. I just want to read it really quickly. About the job. It gives you a little blurb about the business strategy and operations organization of Google. That's all jargon. We could care less. But some real contextual information that not only can you reflect on your resume, but even moving forward to your interviews, because we're going to create a potent resume that gets us to the interview because that's what it's for. But let's read this. The seller success team was formed to drive a transformational evolution in sales culture and selling abilities across Google customer solutions. In this role, you will drive our single most important comprehensive initiative in evolving and up-leveling the entire Google customer solutions sales organization. I'll stop there. That, in a nutshell, framed how this entire process is going to go. That tells you what they're looking for. That tells you what they're expecting. And that tells you kind of what that function and how it operates. Now, that's information that they're not asking you to list on your resume because it's not a minimum qualification. But you best believe if you speak to that, if you're able to speak to that on that resume, that recruiter, that HR business partner will look at that language, will see you were thoughtful in understanding what exactly the business is asking for. And you decided to meet it by getting creative, using the information, revamping it, and using that as a selling point within the bullets on your resume, right? And you should not put a bullet on your resume that you cannot speak to in an interview. And so one thing I love about resume crafting and why I implore you to take the time to truly, truly focus on crafting that resume, because it ultimately prepares you. If you're able to nail your resume and you're able to spit it back and forth, well, then you're going to walk in that interview and you're going to be able to spit it back and forth. If you're able to recall those examples that you thought about when you put on the resume, even the ones that you left off the resume, and you kept them in your memory bank because you went through the exercise of crafting the resume, where you're going to walk into that interview a lot more confident. I tell all my candidates, we're asking you to come in for a reason. So it's on you to make sure you bring that resume alive. We're bringing you in because we saw something on the resume. You bring the resume alive, speak to the job description, stick to the script, and you'll find yourself in a really good situation. Where are we at? 34 after. Promise you only got like 2 more slides left and we'll open it up for Q&A. Oftentimes, I found myself when I would craft my resumes, I would say to myself, okay, I know I'm smart. I know I'm capable. I know I have the skill set. But why can't I find the words to put it on the paper to tell them how awesome I am? And then when I would think of the words or I would think of the examples, it would feel flat. I would put it there and I would look at it, I would read it, I would come back to it, and it just didn't feel potent enough. And so on your screen are core competencies. This is a deck that I like to use, a slide that I like to speak to and use often, because I think it really speaks to our ability to reflect, look inwardly about who we are, understand our strengths, understand our weaknesses, and be able to convey that in corporate language, convey that in corporate speak, put that in corporate lexicon, client service. So as I go through some of these are corporate lexicon or corporate buzzwords. But as we start to dig deep into what it really means and what some examples are, I guarantee you can start just thinking of different examples or different opportunities or different moments in your past when you can say, oh, what are you talking about? Excellent at client service. I respond effectively to internal, external client needs, and here's why. And here's how I did it. I developed a deep understanding and empathy for other people's needs and their point of view, or I demonstrated compassion and passion to serve other people. Wait a minute, I am result focused. I actually do care about when I deliver something that I deliver it on time and I deliver it with quality. I perform high quality work. I take pride in my work, right? You know all these things. You're sitting there and you're thinking about how you're going to craft your resume. You know you're a hard worker. But how do you speak the language? How do you translate that? How do you translate? Can you just put bullet point, hard worker? No, that ain't flying. I wish you could. I really do. Bullet point, I'm a hard worker, give me the job. They don't work like that. You got to play the game, right? You got to understand the language in the game. We talk about Kobe Bryant in a second and how he used to speak Italian on the court just so people wouldn't understand him talking to one of his teammates. Understand the language of the game. Change agility. All of my folks on this call who are part of the Divine Nine, if you're part of one of the historically Black fraternities and sororities, You've been through all of this. You were forced to go through all this just by do your process of initiation. The difficult tests that you had to take and the amount of times you had to study. The founders in which you decided, whatever organization or respective organization you're a part of, had you in mind, preparing you to be able to speak the language. How collaborative are you? Folks who are part of fraternities understand about collaboration, especially if you have line brothers and sisters. How effective are you at your communication? And there's another one that I love. This is a word that I'm actually really studying. Not just communication, but how good are you at influencing? Right? How good are you at influencing? You need to get something done. How good are you at presenting whatever it is you got to present to an audience and actually making them buy it? You got to sell with a buyer's mentality, right? You can only do that when you understand your audience or you understand the players. So as you're selling your resume, right? I say selling meaning shopping it. You created it. Now it's time to actually put it out there. You should probably know who you're sending it to, or you should probably understand the process to best position you. Make sense? All right, it's my second to the last slide, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. It's 40 after. I'm back to my philosophy. This employer engagement thing is just one big game. You went to school, or maybe not, but you looked at the job description and you know you're qualified. You look at the bullet points, and at each line, each bullet point, you say, okay, clearly they made this job description for me. They must have been thinking about me when they created this. This is my role. Are they crazy? I'm going to go ahead and apply, and they're going to give me a call, and then I'm going to let them know how awesome I am, and I'm going to get the job. And then far and too often we do that, or at least we think, or at least we apply and pray somebody calls us back. And then we wake up and we get an email. One of them crazy emails that say thanks but no thanks. And you sit and scratch your head saying, you could have not even looked at my resume. Because if you did, you'd have saw just how qualified I am. Far and too often, we allow that scenario to dissuade us from either applying for more jobs. And I guess what's most detrimental, sometimes we even use that scenario to give up. Think we're not worth, think maybe, maybe we made a mistake. I'm not qualified, or maybe I'm not smart, or maybe for whatever reason, I ain't got it. It's not the case, I promise you. And I believe it's really just an element of understanding the players in this game, understanding their motives, and then meeting the demand. And so we're talking about a resume today. We talked about using that job description as a companion document. You shouldn't be creating you shouldn't be creating your resume without that job description as a North Star, understanding that resume has to go somewhere. And typically that resume goes somewhere on a desk of somebody like mine, who then has to discern and decipher if in fact you're qualified, not just qualified enough to go in this other batch of qualified candidates, because there's multiple screening processes. And so that's why we want to make that resume so potent that it withstands and it lasts every screening process. You want it to be so much so that recruiter looks at that resume and says, okay, I got a job to do. And if my manager saw that I passed up on this highly qualified resume and I didn't push it forward, well, then clearly I'm not doing my job right. So you almost want to force the hand of the player, of the recruiter, of the HR professional, of the HR generalist to make it a no-brainer. And I'm telling you, a high potent resume will do that, even using some of the buzzwords. Again, we're not plagiarizing. So I shouldn't look at your resume and look at the job description like, okay, you're bugging. Like it's the same exact word. We're not doing that, right? We want to remain creative, but we also want to remain authentic. So it needs to be our experiences. It needs to be truthful, And we need to be understanding that if in fact we can't speak to the bullet point, then maybe we're not qualified. And if it's your dream job, then, well, now you have something that just told you what you need to do to get qualified, to get the job. Make sense? And so when we look at that job description, and if in fact it says 5 years and we only got 3, and we look at some of those other bullet points that we may not be making the mark, well, guess what you just had? You got your vision board right there. If that's the job you really want, well, then you'll do what you need to do to get it. You'll do what you need to do to qualify. So that way you're not lying and you can create a more potent resume. It's only a few of us on the call, right? Yeah, we certainly didn't reach the number that we thought we were. So there's an actual, I want to call it a logo, top left corner. Anybody know what that logo is? Can I get a copy of the slide? Absolutely, Kamari, I got you. Job description is about to be, oh, wow, okay, questions coming in, I got you. All right, somebody got to talk to me about this logo before we go into the Q&A real quick. Anybody know what logo, Mac Todd, I'm looking at you, sorry, you know, that logo, you're the first person I saw. Do you know what that logo is? Nah. All right, I'm gonna call on one more person. I can't believe somebody, I'm not gonna call on Daniel. I know Daniel knows. Maybe Ricardo, looking amazing in that suit, young man. Hold me down. You got to take yourself off mute. Can you hear me? Ricardo, you there? Can you hear me? I can barely hear you. Must be that Boost Mobile. Nah, you're not there?
Oh, okay. Hey, maybe.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, what's up, Ricardo? How are you?
In a bad area. You couldn't hear me,
man. Are you able to see your phone? Are you on the phone?
Yeah.
Are you able to see the logo on the top left?
Yeah.
What do you think it is? Just say anything.
It's cool.
Yeah, nice. I actually do think it's cool. Somebody in the comments actually said it looks like a medical logo for medical practitioners. I like that. In fact, it does look like that. But letting the whole cat out of the bag, or the Mamba out of the bag, that is Kobe Bryant's Mamba logo, the Mamba Academy logo, minus I think the snake. The reason why I have that, when we talk about this thing being a game, sort of just tying a bow on my philosophy of this employer engagement thing being one big game. And that's another reason why I didn't bother going through, oh, you need to make sure you have your email address and you need to make sure that everything is spelled correctly on your resume. I actually respect you all enough to know that I think you know that words need to be spelled correctly on your resume and you need some contact information on there, right? And so I purposely didn't go through that type of information. But I really wanted to go through some of the more intricacies, I said that right, intricacies of the actual process, because I believe that's where many of us kind of fall off. And here's why I have the Mamba Mentality logo. I read the book. I encourage anybody to read Kobe Bryant's Mamba Mentality. I usually have this right here. I just can't reach it. And here's why. When we talk about playing the game and shaping and framing a mentality to win, because that's ultimately what, if you're playing this game to get a decline email, you probably should hang up, right? We're playing this game to win. We're playing this game to get that offer. We're playing this game to change the trajectory of our lives. Some of the offers that I extend are changing lives. 50, 60, 70, 80, $100,000 offers. Somebody that didn't have any of that. That's life-changing. I take that extremely serious. So if we want to engage and play this game, I'd like to think we should probably adopt a more Mamba mentality. And here's how. Reading the book. Kobe, not only would he study his opponent relentlessly. So if you're guarding me, well, I'm gonna study you, and I'm gonna study every last player that I think is gonna touch that floor to try to go against me, putting that ball in the basket. I'm gonna study you. I'm gonna study your rhythm. I'm gonna study your cadence. I'm gonna understand your tendencies. I'm gonna know what you do when there's 20 seconds left, and I'm gonna know what you do when there's 2 minutes left on the clock. Why? Because I studied you. But I'm not stopping there. In fact, that's low-hanging fruit. To study the opponent, that's common sense, right? I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing. Kobe studied the referee rule book. The referees that are on the same court with the players. The referees who enforce the rules. The referees who control the flow of the game. Kobe Bryant studied their manual front to back. Why? Because he understood that they're part of the game. And if you want to gain any advantage in anything you do, well, you don't just look at the big picture. You drill down into the small intricacies. Because you may think you're the only person applying, but I can promise you, there's probably a good 100, 200, 500. I've seen requisitions that had 1,500 candidates for 3 roles. Are you willing to compete? Can you compete? You gonna put your resume with your 3 years when this man has 6 and they're asking for 5? Is it worth the investment? Or should you focus your energy elsewhere? Kobe read the referee's manual so that in any given time, he could look over at them and see where their positioning is based on what the book that they read told them to do. So he can do something on the side, like pull somebody's jersey, or some people call it cheating. Other people just call it gaining an advantage, because I knew the referee can't call it because he can't see it, because I read the book and I see where he's at or she's at. That's the mentality that I'm talking about. So if you got on this call thinking I was going to tell you that you need to dot I's, cross T's, make sure that your email address is correct, and make sure that your phone number and your name is on the resume, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Sorry. It's a quick Google search could let that go, and it certainly wouldn't take 60 minutes where I'm at. 10 minutes left. That said, I encourage you all to really think a little deeper. Take it a step further. Yeah, you applied. Now what? Yeah, I need to actually go on LinkedIn and see who's the recruiter that's going to be looking at this. Oh, okay. Well, I looked on LinkedIn at Marsha McLennan, and there's about 6 recruiters. Well, I'm engaging all of them. Or I may get a little more creative. I know I'm in college, so maybe I need to go to their college recruiting team. Limit my options a little bit, and then work from there. We got to get creative, because the days of just creating your resume, going to Google's website, oh, that's a great role, I qualify, let me just apply. Those days are done. They're done. Furthermore, again, understanding the competition, understanding the game. You need to also understand, if you're just applying to a role, you're already 10 paces behind that referral, because they're part of the game also. Referrals, in case you didn't know, that's the CEO or the vice president or the senior vice president's pool boy who needs an internship. Well, guess how that works? Well, the CEO just calls down to HR and says, hey, here's a resume. I'm gonna need y'all to go ahead and, they won't tell you, but just make sure you do what you do. They didn't apply. Half of them don't even know the company exists, but yet they're a leg up on you. Somebody who did the research, somebody who crafted the resume, somebody who applied to the role, somebody who's checking their email every 5 minutes, hoping that their recruiter reaches out to you telling you got an interview. But yet you got the referral who just don't even know about the company. It's real and it happens. And so it's important that you understand all of the components of this game so you can best position yourself to play it better. All right, let's see. I told you 8 minutes. Let's get to some of these questions with Kobe's Mama Snakes. Christian was spot on. Just fixed my audio. Mac, you're good money. Would you recommend bypassing the recruiter and engaging the hiring manager directly? Eric, great question. Okay. Sometimes it just happens that way. If it happens organically, bypassing the recruiter. If it happens organically, absolutely. If you happen to meet the hiring manager at a career fair or something and you've established a rapport, more times than not, they're going to say, I like this person, Torrance. This is who I met. Do what you got to do, screen them, all that good stuff. I want to give you another scenario. You went on Google, you saw a role. For whatever reason, you did some creative stuff where you actually found the manager for that role. You're asking, do I go directly to the manager or do I go to the recruiter? My suggestion, I will be bold and I will go to the hiring manager. I will send a short, sweet email just saying, I'm interested in the role. Here's my resume, and keep it short and sweet, but keep it potent. And at that moment, understanding how the organizational structure operates, in your mind, you're hoping that hiring manager sends it to me. That's your play there. Because the hiring manager can't hire you. The hiring manager isn't going to do anything. There's a process that has to take place, and that process sits in HR. So to answer your question, I would say use your intuition, your best judgment. It's not bad to bypass the recruiter, but just know, and in doing so, the recruiter's going to know and find out. And so if the recruiter finds out you did it almost purposely and maliciously, well, then that's a whole nother bag of worms. You probably you would rather not open. Keep things organic. Let's not overthink things. That's another thing I want to stress. These are still people at the end of the day, right? We talk about processes. We talk about the employer. We talk about the big cold building. That we think about that when we think about the employer. And we lose sight of the fact that these are still people playing behind the scenes, pulling the strings, having the conversations, making decisions. And so we want to play to the people. And so we always want to be courteous. We always want to lead with our best intentions in mind. We always want to be humble and thoughtful and gracious because, again, we're dealing with people and we want to get something done. We want to get something done. Great, great question. Fortune favors the bold. I like that, Christian. I really do. I had a final interview for a job and it was canceled 19 hours before the meeting. Shame on them. Shame on them, Kamari. I had a final interview for a job. I would actually like to talk to you about that, Kamari, or offline. Shame on them. I'm hopeful that they reschedule 19 hours before the meeting. I'm curious to know if COVID had anything to do with that. But things do happen, and so I don't want to totally bash them. Things certainly happen. There's been times where I actually had to cancel interviews, whether it be somebody fell ill, somebody couldn't move forward with the interview, or the role was pulled. The role was discontinued. And so things do happen. But I would certainly like to kind of speak to you offline about that to kind of see where you're at with that. And hopefully it didn't leave too much of a bad taste in your mouth, and how to actually recoup from that. How we, if you're still interested in a role, how we can best position you to make sure we can, got you. Okay, I'm reading it now, sorry. We'll talk about it. Let's talk about that. Good stuff. Any other questions? I'm loving it.
Torrance, I had a question.
What? Who's that? Hold on, let me turn my volume on. Who's that?
It's Justin.
Justin Watson. Jay, what's up, Jay? Chris, how are you, sir?
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. Do we want to do a plug real quick? We want to do a New Twist Radio plug real quick?
Sure. I wasn't going to, but sure. Check out newtwistradio.com. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All your throwback
Every Friday, I wake up to this man that's speaking right now. I'm telling y'all, if y'all wake up, what's the Friday mix? What you call it?
Friday Vibes Morning Show.
Friday Vibes Morning Show. I'm trying to tell y'all, it's gonna have y'all. It's gonna give you a bop. That's all I'm saying. My bad, Justin. What's going on, Justin?
That was all good. First of all, thank you for the information. Thank you for this platform. I had a question about the sites like Indeed, Monster, Glassdoor, all those sites that kind of ask you to put a resume up before you even apply to a job. They want a cookie cutter resume in a sense. I just wanted to know your thoughts on that, if you could speak a little bit towards that.
Funny enough, I did the same thing for the D9 Resume Exchange. And the reason for that is it's a passive way for the employers on the back end to find you. And so it's not about, I know I preach about job description. This kind of upends the entire process, meaning this isn't about you applying for the job. This is the employer actually putting in keywords and your resume pops up. And then it's on them to determine if they want to engage with you or not. If I'm being completely honest, and I'm gonna be completely transparent, that's where the money is for an Indeed. That's where the money is for a D9 Resume Exchange on the employer side. For them to be able to go in and search for candidates in an instant, that's a huge selling point. And that's not the only way the candidate actually benefits if the employer actually gives you a call. But for the most, and so there's an upside to, just posting your resume. I mean, what do you really have to lose, However, that's more for the employers than the candidate. It's for the employer to be able to go in, tap in and say, yep, I'm looking for a risk management major that went to St. John's University that's interested in New York City with 0 to 2 years work experience. They'll be able to go in and the magnitude of the Indeed database, they're going to get a hit. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Appreciate that.
Great question. What else y'all got? Anything else? We got 2 minutes. Anything else? And if not, I am not the type of person to keep people on a call any more than we have to. So I'll pause for 10 seconds. If not, we will end this call. Any more questions? Talk about beating the ATS. Oh, ATS is an applicant tracking system. ATS, any truth to the resume should be 70-80% keywords to advance your application. There is truth to that. Great question. So the question basically is, should you basically be trying to tailor your, this is why I talk about the job description, should you tailor your resume to be able to allow the algorithm to pick up your resume based on certain keywords or buzzwords? The answer to that is yes. I will say, however, because this entire process is subjective, it all depends on the recruiter. Because you'll have some recruiters who could care less about the buzzword. You actually have to go in and type those words in for the resumes to come up. You're speaking, you're talking to a recruiter right now. I almost never have done it, but I do have colleagues who do it, especially on the more lateral, or when you're recruiting for like C-suite or really high level type of roles, and you need some really what's the word I'm looking for? You need some profound keywords to be able to really search for some folks. That's when that really comes into play. 0 to like 5 years, we're not really using keywords like that. We're kind of really just going through the real process of maybe just taking a look at resumes, whether you applied or whether you engaged via LinkedIn or just email, cold call, what have you. But I never want to say that ATS buzz keyword thing isn't a thing, because it is. But it really depends on the recruiter. Now, I will say this: craft your resume. Drop the buzzwords when you can. Certainly, and again, that job description, understanding the language of the company, because they'll use them, they'll drop them right there in the job description, and you can lift them up. You can either use them verbatim, or you can play around with it and use some synonyms, as long as you get that point across. But again, to your point, should you try to put some keywords? Should you try to use percentages, numbers, increase revenue by 35%? That's the type of stuff that algorithm will pick up, and that could play to the benefit. It goes to the point of the Mamba mentality, understanding what you're up against, studying it, and beating it every step of the way. Great question, Eric, and thank you for that. I know with a lot of government jobs, your resume won't get through without hitting those buzzwords. And I'm Daniel, great question. I will never position myself as somebody who is an expert on that government side. That's another beast. Those grades and what you got to do to rank and all that other stuff. I'm strictly talking about non-government positions. But great point, D. Great point. So non-government. I'm talking non-government. That's not my wheelhouse. Government is not my wheelhouse. 7:02. It's 2 minutes past the hour, and y'all making me a liar right now. Any more questions? If not, I'm ending this call. 5 seconds. Everybody, thank you so much. Truly appreciate you spending this last 60 minutes with me. I am starting this series just out of a passion. This is a passion project. I get a ton of DMs and a ton of emails with questions about the recruitment process. Folks who've read the book are constantly emailing me, asking me questions. And so I felt the need to put this series together to talk about things like resume building, interviewing, salary negotiation, employer engagement, and things of that nature. So I really appreciate your time. Any questions, any comments, anything I can do better, there's my social, @the Career Plug on Instagram. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, Torrance S. Trainham. Feel free to